My name is Anna. I'm 24 years old and I still live with my father. When I was 17, my mother died. It was as if the world around me had darkened. My mother, my father, and I were no longer anything but one. For us, my mother wasn't just a mother and a wife, but a whole world unto herself, the center of our lives. With her passing, everything changed. Our house, once filled with laughter and sweetness, transformed into a silent museum of memories. I was still just a little girl back then, barely understanding life. But even at that age, I could see how much my father had changed. He was devastated by grief, but I often heard him talking to someone on the phone. It seemed to me he was seeking new support and a new breath of life so as not to suffocate in his sorrow. My father is now 51, but he looks much younger. He exercises, takes care of himself, and without the gray hair at his temples, you could easily mistake him for a 44-year-old man. A year after my mother's death, my father started talking about marriage. At 20, I simply couldn't accept it. Dad, why am I here? I take care of everything at home. Cooking, laundry, cleaning. You don't need anything. I told him, but he would sigh heavily and tell me that I didn't understand, that it wasn't the same at all. I saw how much he suffered from loneliness, but my heart simply could not accept another woman in the house. Anna, you can't do this. This is life. You must get married, start your own family. You're young and you can't spend your whole life taking care of me. He tried to convince me, but I, on the contrary, wanted him to abandon this idea because I knew I couldn't share him with anyone. It seemed to me that another woman would not only take my mother's place in the house, but also in his heart, and I simply couldn't bear that. So, we lived in constant arguments and misunderstandings. He insisted that I get married, and I insisted that he not remarry. In the meantime, several young men proposed to me. One of them, Kirill, was my age, a tall, muscular man with blue eyes, honest, who worked for a construction company in our small town of Novigrad-Volynski. He proposed that I move into his apartment, which he had bought on the outskirts of town. And to my great surprise, my father strongly supported him. He simply wouldn't leave me alone until I agreed. Anna, this man is your chance. He's a good, hardworking man. You can live separately, and me. And then I could organize my life, he said. I was so hurt, as if my father wanted to get rid of me to clear a path for himself. Those words wounded me deeply. Dad, I'm not going anywhere. I won't get married and I won't leave you alone, I shouted. He simply shook his head, and a strange mix of pity and despair showed on his face. He explained to me that I didn't understand that a man his age needed something different, that he needed a woman to talk to go to the cinema with, or just to cuddle with in the evening. I was only 20 years old and I didn't understand his needs, nor did I want to. I thought I could replace my mother, be everything for him. But I was wrong. My stubbornness began to wear me down mentally. I stopped smiling and withdrew into myself. During the day, I sat in my room reading or looking out the window, and in the evening, I didn't want to have dinner with my father. He noticed my state but said nothing. It was as if we had drifted apart. He tried to talk to me, invited me for walks like before, but I always refused. I felt he had betrayed me, that he wanted to erase my mother from his life and replace her. One evening, as I sat in my room, my father knocked on the door. I opened it. He was wearing a sweater and looked very tired. "Can I come in, Anna? I want to talk," he said. I nodded, and he sat on the edge of my bed. "My dear, I see how much you're suffering, and I am too. I don't want to push you out. I just want you to be happy. I want you to have your own family. Believe me, you deserve better than sitting with me between four walls making soup." These words made me think, but I still couldn't shake the idea that he just wanted to get rid of me. He went on to tell me how much he had loved my mother. He talked about things I didn't know, how they met their first date, how she would always be the only one for him. And at that moment, looking into his eyes, which were filled with tears for the first time, I saw not just my father, but a man who had lost the woman he loved in unbearable loneliness. He spoke of a lack. I didn't fully understand what he meant at that moment, but I saw his pain so frail, so helpless, unable to soothe his longing. I began to ask him questions about my mother, about their relationship. He told me, and as I listened, with every word, I drew closer to him, to the point where I could at least partially fill the void left in his heart, as if he was becoming my father again, and not the stranger who wanted to send me away. But then his demeanor changed. He began to tell me how much I resembled my mother. "Anna, you're just her copy. You have the same beautiful eyes, the same long hair." And at that instant, I saw something strange. It was as if I ceased to be myself and became the ghost of my mother. He was looking at me, but it seemed he wasn't seeing me, but her. It was both strange and, for an unknown reason, strangely pleasant. He was so happy that I was listening, and I could see he needed this not just to find a replacement, but something much greater. That evening, we talked for several hours. When he left, I was completely lost. I no longer knew what to do. On one hand, I was still hurt that he wanted me to marry, but on the other, for the first time, I saw him so vulnerable and unhappy. I had to help him, but I didn't know how. I wanted so much for him to be happy, but I still couldn't imagine another woman by his side. I closed my eyes and thought that I had to do something to stop him from getting married, to keep him with me. I had to become everything for him, that mother. The next day I made a decision. I realized I couldn't just stand by and watch my father sink into loneliness. I had to act, and my plan was simple. I would agree to marry Carol, but only on my terms. I approached my father, who was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper, and said, "Dad, I agree to marry Kier." He looked up, his eyes wide with surprise, then with joy. "Anna, I'm so happy. I was so afraid you'd never agree," he said, hugging me tighter than ever. I was doing something good. I was giving him back the happiness he had lost. But inside, I had a second secret plan that I couldn't reveal to anyone. I gave him my conditions. We would move into my apartment, not his, and live separately from him so he could see his fiancée. Dad was ready to accept all the conditions as long as I was happy. He immediately called Kirill to tell him I agreed. A few days later, Curiel came to see us. We sat in the living room, and for the first time in a long time, it was calm. He was so kind, so simple. He didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't try to pry into my soul. He simply looked at me with such tenderness that my heart, frozen for so long, began to thaw. We got engaged. Everything happened so fast. I didn't have time to catch my breath. We planned to get married in 3 months to have time to prepare everything. In the meantime, Kirill had to go work in Poland for 3 weeks. I saw how hard he worked to buy new furniture and renovate our future apartment. He wanted us to have the best, and I saw that he was the man I wanted to be with. He was so attentive, so deliberate. He always brought me flowers and candy. He bought me new dresses. I particularly liked one. It was the color of spring sky with bare shoulders. My father was happier than ever. He radiated joy. I often found him on the phone, and his beaming face clearly indicated his life was improving. It was nice to see him like that. He joked, laughed constantly, and the house was once again filled with a warm atmosphere. But my heart was still restless. I still couldn't accept the idea that my father would have another woman. I thought constantly about Mom, about what she would say if she saw this. My conscience tormented me, and I couldn't get rid of it. I had to do something to silence my guilt. I decided to become even more attentive, even more caring towards my father. I started cooking his favorite dishes, buying him new shirts, suggesting walks. I wanted him to know he still mattered to me, that I hadn't forgotten him. I constantly told him how much I loved him. One day while Carol was at work, I decided to surprise Dad. I bought all his favorite foods and prepared a festive dinner. I put on my favorite dress and even did my hair carefully. When he came home, he was very surprised. "Anna, what is all this?" I replied that I just wanted to make him happy. We sat down to dinner, and I repeated that we were one family, and that I had to do everything so we would never separate. We talked for a long time. He told me about his life, his work, his plans. I listened to him with such pleasure that time flew by without me noticing. At the end of dinner, he said he needed to rest. I went to my room. I couldn't sleep. I felt I had done something wrong, that I was mistaken, that I was deceiving Curiel and even my father. I lay in my bed thinking about what I had to do to make everything right. Suddenly, I heard Dad call me. I went to him. He was sitting in the living room wearing his favorite wool sweater. "I can't sleep, Anna. I'm thinking so much about you and Mom. I'm doing everything wrong." "I miss her so much," he said. I sat next to him and hugged him. I could feel his pain, and at that moment, I realized I had to do something so he wouldn't feel so alone. I had to become a mother for him. I had to do everything so he would never marry. I didn't know what to do. Thousands of thoughts raced through my mind, but none gave me an answer. I sat next to Dad, and his pain became mine. He held me in his arms as a little girl seeks comfort. He stroked my head and said, "You look so much like her, Anna. Your hair smells like hers, and your voice too. I could listen to you for hours." I was both frightened and happy. I understood he wasn't addressing me, but my mother. He was looking for her in my eyes, in my voice, and I realized I could offer him something no other woman could. I could be his mother, his wife, his friend. I could be everything she was for him. I decided I had to do everything to make him forget his fiancée. I started spending all my free time with him. We walked in the park, went to the cinema, to the cafe. I constantly repeated to him how much I loved him and how much I cherished our relationship. He was happy. I saw him come back to life. I saw the spark return to his eyes. He stopped talking on the phone with his fiancée, and I was on the right track. Our house was once again filled with laughter and joy. We cooked together, cleaned together, watched movies together. We were like a family again. I felt as if I had won, as if I had managed to stop him from marrying to keep him close to me. But my heart was still troubled. I was doing something wrong. I was deceiving not only Curl but also myself. I knew I couldn't be everything for my father. I knew he needed a woman who would be by his side, whom he would understand, whom he would love. But I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want anyone else to take my mother's place in his life. The wedding day arrived. I put on the most beautiful dress Curiel had given me. It was the color of spring sky with bare shoulders and a long hem. I looked like a princess. Curiel couldn't take his eyes off me. He kept telling me how much he loved me. We got married. Everything was so beautiful, so solemn. I was happy. But at the same time, my heart was heavy. I knew I wasn't doing this for me, but for my father. After the wedding, we moved into our apartment. It was so beautiful, so warm. We were happy together. He was so attentive, so caring. He always tried to make me happy. But I couldn't forget my father. I thought about him constantly. I called him all the time. I had to be near him. That very evening, I asked Curiel to drive me to my father's. I told him I needed to talk to him, that I couldn't leave him alone. Curiel objected. He said we should spend the night together, that we should enjoy our wedding. But I couldn't listen. I was adamant. I had to be with my father. Finally, Kirill agreed. We went to my father's. I asked Kirill to wait in the car. I went into the house. Dad was sitting in the living room reading a book. He was so surprised to see me. Anna, what are you doing here? Why aren't you with Coral? He asked. I went to him. I can't leave you alone, Dad. I have to be with you. Curiel waited for me in the car, but I couldn't bring myself to leave my father. I stayed with him all night telling my husband that Dad had had a heart attack and I couldn't leave him. Kil believed me. He was so kind and loved me so much. He couldn't imagine I was lying to him. I was guilty, but at the same time happy. I was lying in my old bed in my old room. I was in the right place. I was doing what I had to do because I couldn't leave my father alone. The next day, I went back to Kirill, but a few hours later, I went back to my father. I told Kir that Dad was better, but that I had to take care of him. Kir understood that I couldn't leave my father, and he never suspected I was deceiving him. He was so kind and loved me so much that I felt horrible, but I couldn't stop. And so my double life began. By day, I was Kirill's wife, and by evening, I was the daughter taking care of her sick father. Kirill worked late, and I spent all my free time with Dad. We walked, talked, watched movies. I had finally found my place in life. I was happy, but at the same time, tormented by guilt. I knew I was deceiving Krill, that I was betraying him. I started dressing to please my father. I wore the dresses he liked. I did my hair the way he preferred. He kept telling me I looked like Mom and that I could replace her. I loved when he said that. I loved when he looked at me as if I were Mom. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Dad looked at me differently. His gaze was softer, deeper. He came closer, sat next to me and said, Anna, you look so much like her. I miss her so much. I miss her too, I said. He needed me. He couldn't live without me. His hand was trembling. And at that moment, I understood I had to do something so he wouldn't be alone. I had to become his mother. I had to become everything for him. I had to do everything so he would never marry. I continued to live in this strange triangle. Me at one corner, my husband Kirill at another, and my father at the third. I was torn between two lives, unable to choose just one. I wanted to be a good daughter and a good wife, but I understood it was impossible to be both at once. Every evening when I came home, I felt guilty. He was so kind to me, so attentive, and yet I was deceiving him. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but I also couldn't stop. I began to notice my attitude towards Kirill changing. I thought constantly about my father and felt I was betraying him when I spent time with my husband. I started avoiding Krill. I said I had a headache, that I was tired. Of course, he understood everything and tried to be even more attentive, which only increased my guilt. One evening, as we sat in our apartment, I felt I couldn't go on like this anymore. I had to make a decision. I had to choose between my father and my husband, and I knew I would choose my father. I couldn't leave him alone. I couldn't let him get married. I couldn't let someone else take my mother's place. I went to Kil and told him I had to leave. He was in shock. Anna, what's wrong? You can't leave me like this, he said. I replied that I couldn't explain, that I had to leave. He tried to stop me, but I freed myself and ran. I ran through the streets of our small town, tears streaming down my cheeks. I knew I was doing something terrible, but I couldn't stop. I ran to my father. He was surprised to see me in such a state. Anna, what happened? He asked. I couldn't say anything. I just hugged him and burst into tears. He held me in his arms and said, Don't cry, my dear. I'm here. I'll always be with you.